So a quick comparison video between two Motorola smartphones that I've done separate review videos on as well. So be sure to check those out too. I've got the Motorola G31, which is a new budget Motorola device. And I've also got the Motorola Edge from 2020, kind of a upper mid-range. So it'll be interesting to see how the G31 stacks up against a 2-year-old upper mid-range device. So if you're interested, stick around. But also, random question, what do you think of the fish? Something different that I thought I'd stick in the background of my videos. So we'll see what happens. So this may be quite a strange comparison to do, as there's not really any relation as such between the G31 and the Motorola Edge. But if you're considering buying a new budget Motorola device, it might be worth considering the Motorola Edge as well. But I'll first start with the G31. 6.4-inch AMOLED display up front with a 60Hz refresh rate. So they did strip back the 90Hz display from the older G30, but they boosted to an AMOLED and 1080p. It's a really nice display, to be fair. It is quite saturated, and turning off the saturated setting in the display settings does bring the display to quite dull colors. So it's just kind of one extreme to the other that I did find with this display. But other than that, it's absolutely fine. There's no issues with it at all. Up in the punch hole center, you get a 13 megapixel selfie camera, which is capable of 1080p video at 30 FPS. And then you get a slight chin at the bottom of the phone, which you do find on most budget phones these days, not just from Motorola. The back is made of plastic, and up in the top left corner you get a triple camera system consisting of a 50 megapixel f1.8 primary camera, an 8 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide, and a 2 megapixel f2.4 macro camera. So they do away with the 2 megapixel depth sensor, but the Motorola G31 does absolutely fine with portrait shots without the use of that depth sensor. You've got your usual Google Assistant button and volume rocker on the left hand side, along with the power button with integrated fingerprint sensor. And then on the left, you've got a SIM tray, which can house obviously your SIM card and a micro SD card. At the bottom, you've got a microphone, a USB-C charging port, which supports up to 20-watt charging, despite only getting a 10-watt charger supplied in the box, and then a single bottom firing speaker. And then at the top of the phone, you get another microphone and a 3.5mm headphone jack. As for RAM and storage, I've got 4GB of RAM and 64GB of storage on this G31, but it is also available with 128GB of storage as well. And powering the G31, you get MediaTek's Helio G85 processor built on a 12nm fabrication. Unfortunately, it is a processor that is around 2 years old, so I'm not really sure why Motorola decided to use that. I mean, if they were going to use an old processor, maybe the G95, which would have just given it that little bit more power. But the G85, don't get me wrong, is absolutely fine for your day-to-day tasks, just scrolling through the interface, a bit of light gaming and camera use, no problem at all. But if you want something that's going to handle slightly more demanding games, you probably will want to look elsewhere. Running on the Motorola G31 is just your general stock Android experience, which is what you'll find on other Motorola devices, but it is running the older Android 11. Unfortunately, there isn't an Android 12 update on the G31 just yet, so only time will tell as to whether we get that update on here. The Motorola G31 is packed with a 5000 mAh battery, which supports 20-watt fast charging. So battery life on the G31 has been absolutely fine. I've had no issues at all with endurance during a pretty heavy day of use. So if you want a phone with good battery life, the G31 is a good option. So now let's move on to the Motorola Edge. So the Motorola Edge ups the game in the display department over the G31 with a 6.7-inch curved OLED display with a fast 90Hz refresh rate. Overall, it's just a better display, more natural colors, and because of that 90Hz display, everything just seems a lot smoother. Up in the top left corner, you get a 25 megapixel selfie camera, which bins photos down to 6.2 megapixels, and it does shoot video also at 1080p at 30 FPS. You also get an in-display fingerprint sensor on the Motorola Edge. So that is something that's a big upgrade over the capacitive fingerprint sensor on the side of the G31. And on the back of the Motorola Edge, it is also made of plastic, but it's got this kind of more glossy look to it. Looks a little bit more premium. And then in the top left-hand corner, you get a triple camera system, which consists of a 64 megapixel f1.8 primary camera, a 16 megapixel f2.2 ultra wide, and then an 8 megapixel f2.4 telephoto camera, which supports 3 times optical zoom. So you've got a much more versatile camera system on the Motorola Edge, and it does support 4K video recording at 30 FPS. And then as for buttons and ports, on the left you get your power button with your volume rocker. The left side of the phone is completely clean, and that's because the SIM tray is located in the top part of the phone alongside a microphone. And then at the bottom, you get a speaker, USB-C charging port, and a headphone jack. And one thing to know about the speaker system on the Motorola Edge is it is a stereo speaker setup, so you do get another speaker in the earpiece here. The Motorola Edge does support 18 watt fast charging of the 4500 milliamp hour battery, and battery life on the Motorola Edge has been absolutely fine. It's easily lasted me a whole day, a day at work, and I quite frequently get back with over 60% left. So I've got zero complaints with regards to battery life on the Motorola Edge. As for RAM and storage options on the Motorola Edge, you can either get 4 or 6 gigabytes of RAM with either 128 or 256 gigabytes of expandable storage. And powering the Motorola Edge is Qualcomm Snapdragon 765G processor, which is built on a more efficient 7nm fabrication than the G85 found in the Motorola G31. And it is also a 5G ready chip, so you do get 5G support on the Motorola Edge. So performance comparisons between the Motorola Edge and the G31. The Snapdragon 765 inside the Motorola Edge is more powerful than the G85 found inside the G31. So if you want a phone with a bit more raw power, and if you're one that's into gaming, then I would definitely pick the Motorola Edge. And photography wise, there isn't a huge amount to complain with either of these phones, if I'm perfectly honest. They both shoot really nice natural photos. There's no oversaturating of any of the colors or anything like that. They haven't got any of this aggressive AI modes or anything like that. So photos coming from both phones do produce really natural and plenty of detailed photos as well. Both ultra wides are good quality. The Motorola Edge, of course, has that 16 megapixel sensor over the 8 megapixel on the G31, so you will get slightly more detailed photos from that. And of course, the Motorola Edge has that 8 megapixel telephoto camera, so punching in to get closer to a subject, you're not going to lose as much detail on the Motorola Edge as what you'll find on the G31. So that's my very quick comparison between the Motorola Edge and the Motorola G31. Both really great phones. At the moment, the G31 is available for 150 quid, and the Motorola Edge, I was quite lucky. I won it on a bid for just less than 90 quid on eBay. But if you're looking at buying one now, you may still be looking at around £200. But to be honest, that's still a pretty good price for such a premium looking device. But let me know in the comments which one you'd pick out of either of these phones, or is there another Motorola device that you would choose instead? And don't forget to subscribe if you enjoyed this video. And thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. The Snapdragon 765 inside the Motorola Edge is a more powerful processor than the G85.